Selena Quintanilla's tragic death, 2025 has delivered the twist no one expected. Hidden evidence, unsealed files, and a haunting statement we suspected her all along have surfaced, sending shock waves through fans and investigators alike. Even Lester Hall briefly touched on the developments, calling them unexpected and unsettling. A new Netflix documentary adds fuel to the fire, revealing what Selena's inner circle had kept quiet for decades. Could this be the moment the truth finally breaks through the silence? What really happened that morning at the motel? One thing's certain, the mystery is no longer buried. What really happened that morning, the final hours of Selena Quintanilla? It was supposed to be a quiet morning in Corpus Christi. Selena Quintanilla, just 23 years old and already a Tejano music superstar, left her home to meet with a woman she once considered a close friend. That woman was Yolanda Saldívar, president of her fan club and manager of her growing boutique empire. But what happened next would not only end Selena's life, it would send shock waves through the world and leave behind questions that still haven't gone away. Selena arrived at the Days Inn Motel at around 11 a.m. on March 31st, 1995. She wasn't meeting a stranger. She was meeting someone who had for years been inside her inner circle. Someone who had managed her fan club, worked closely with her family, and earned her trust. But recently, things had changed. Selena had discovered troubling financial discrepancies tied to Yolanda. Money was missing from both the fan club and the boutiques. Receipts weren't adding up. Her father, Abraham Quintanilla, had warned her to cut ties. And yet, Selena insisted on meeting Yolanda again. According to those close to her, she believed Yolanda still held critical documents, including tax records and bank statements. The meeting reportedly didn't go well. According to reports, the two argued. Selena demanded the documents. Yolanda, now cornered, stalled, and shifted blame. And then, as Selena turned to leave room 158, Yolanda pulled a .38 caliber handgun from her purse and fired. The bullet entered Selena's lower right shoulder, severing a major artery. She staggered out of the room, leaving a trail of blood as she ran across the motel parking lot toward the lobby, screaming for help. Witnesses say Selena collapsed at the front desk, gasping, "Yolanda, room 158." She had managed to identify her killer before her body could no longer respond. Paramedics rushed to the scene. She was transported to Memorial Medical Center, but the damage was catastrophic. Despite desperate efforts, doctors pronounced her dead at 10:05 p.m. She had lost too much blood. News of her death spread faster than anyone could have imagined. Local stations interrupted programming. Radio DJs wept on air. And outside the hospital, fans gathered in disbelief. A rising star, a beloved icon, a daughter, a wife, gone in an instant. But it wasn't just the fact that she was murdered that devastated people. It was who pulled the trigger. Yolanda Saldívar had been more than a colleague. She had been someone the Quintanilla family let into their business, their lives, their home. What followed that day was even more surreal. As police surrounded the motel, Yolanda locked herself in her truck with a gun and began a nearly 9-hour standoff. She cried. She begged negotiators, but ultimately she surrendered. And from that moment on, the case against her seemed airtight. But here's where things get murky. Despite the clear timeline, the witnesses, the confession, some say there were signs that something didn't sit right. Why did Selena go alone? Why did she continue to give Yolanda chances even after discovering the theft? And what exactly happened in that motel room before the shot was fired? Those final hours have been dissected, re-examined, and retold countless times. But in 2025, new updates suggest there's still more to the story. Maybe the answers have been hiding in plain sight. Or maybe someone always knew more than they let on. Either way, what happened in room 158 didn't just change the music industry. It opened a mystery that refuses to die. Who was Yolanda Saldívar behind the fan club? Who was Yolanda Saldívar? To understand the mystery surrounding Selena's death, you have to understand Yolanda Saldívar, not just as the woman who pulled the trigger, but as the figure who quietly embedded herself into every corner of Selena's world. For many fans, the question has never just been why did she do it, but how did she even get that close in the first place? Yolanda wasn't a childhood friend. She wasn't a seasoned business partner. In fact, before meeting Selena, she was a registered nurse living in San Antonio, reportedly quiet and reserved with a history of bouncing between jobs. But in 1991, everything changed. After attending a Selena concert, Yolanda became obsessed. She called Selena's father repeatedly, requesting to start a fan club. Abraham Quintanilla eventually gave her permission, likely assuming it would be a simple, small-scale operation. It didn't stay small. Under Yolanda's management, the fan club ballooned to thousands of members. She handled memberships, merchandise, meet and greets. Selena's popularity was exploding and Yolanda was always nearby, organizing events, handling fans, sending cards, and building what looked like an unbreakable bond with the Quintanilla family. Her loyalty appeared absolute, so much so that when Selena launched her boutiques, Yolanda was asked to help manage the finances. To the outside world, Yolanda was fiercely protective of Selena. To insiders, she was always present, sometimes too present. Former employees at Selena, etc. Boutiques would later describe her as controlling, difficult to work with, and obsessed with Selena's every move. Some said she inserted herself into conversations, intercepted phone calls, even tried to limit Selena's access to others. But Selena, known for her generosity and kindness, didn't cut ties. She kept giving Yolanda the benefit of the doubt. Behind the scenes, red flags were piling up. Boutique staff began voicing concerns. Customers weren't receiving merchandise. Fan club members were complaining about missing packages. Receipts weren't matching up. And in early 1995, Abraham began a quiet investigation. What he found alarmed him. Thousands of dollars in missing funds, altered documents, unaccounted sales. He confronted Yolanda, who denied everything, then later offered contradictory explanations. According to reports, she claimed the missing records had been stolen in a break-in in Mexico, an event that could never be verified. Abraham warned Selena. He told her to end the relationship. But Selena, ever hopeful, still believed there was a way to resolve it peacefully. She wanted the records back. She wanted to avoid a scandal. And maybe she still believed Yolanda could be reasoned with. But there's another layer here that's harder to ignore. Over the years, theories have emerged that Yolanda's devotion crossed the line into obsession. Some psychologists have suggested signs of pathological attachment. Others have pointed to her controlling behavior as a form of psychological manipulation. She wasn't just managing a fan club. She was inserting herself into Selena's life with growing intensity. There were early signs, but no one expected where it would lead. Not even Selena. By the time the truth started coming out, it was too late. Yolanda had gone from fan to friend, from friend to business associate, and from associate to someone capable of betrayal at the highest level. What remains unclear is whether her descent into violence was premeditated or a breakdown triggered by fear of being exposed. But what is clear is that Yolanda had positioned herself as indispensable, and Selena, despite warnings, kept her close. The woman who once claimed she would do anything for Selena ultimately did the unthinkable. And decades later, we're still asking how no one saw it coming. Or maybe they did and simply didn't act fast enough. The trial that closed the case, the trial that closed the case. Or did it? The courtroom was packed. Media crews swarmed outside. Fans held candles and posters, hoping for justice. Inside, Yolanda Saldívar sat quietly, facing a charge that needed no introduction. The evidence was overwhelming. The story had already played out on national news. Selena Quintanilla was dead, and everyone knew who pulled the trigger. But was that really the end of the story? The trial began in October 1995 in Houston, moved there due to the massive media attention in Corpus Christi. Prosecutors laid out the timeline. Yolanda lured Selena to the days and under the pretense of handing over missing business records. The argument escalated. Then came the gunshot. The jury was shown crime scene photos, listened to expert testimony, and heard how Selena managed to identify Yolanda before collapsing. The defense didn't deny that Yolanda fired the shot. Instead, they claimed it was an accident. Yolanda's lawyers argued she had intended to shoot herself, not Selena. They claimed the gun discharged as Selena tried to walk away. A tragic moment, They said, a panicked reaction. But the evidence told a different story. The bullet struck Selena in the back, angled upward, suggesting she had already turned away when the gun was fired. That detail was hard to argue. After just 2 hours of deliberation, the jury found Yolanda Saldívar guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced her to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. It seemed final. Fans felt justice had been served. Selena's family tried to move forward. But in the years that followed, cracks began to show. Cracks that some believe never got the attention they deserved. For one, questions emerged about the handling of certain evidence. In 2019, Yolanda claimed that her defense attorneys were never shown a pair of white shoes and a black baseball cap collected by investigators. These items reportedly appeared for the first time in a Spanish-language TV segment more than 2 decades after the trial. She argued that withholding those items violated her right to a fair defense. Her legal team filed a post-conviction petition, calling it a possible Brady violation, the suppression of evidence favorable to the defense. But the courts rejected the claim, stating the evidence would not have changed the outcome of the trial. Still, it raised eyebrows. Why were items potentially tied to the crime scene never fully disclosed? And if they were irrelevant, why did they appear years later in media coverage, not during the legal proceedings? Then came a different issue, the character of a key witness. Norma Martinez, the motel clerk who testified that Selena named Yolanda before collapsing, had a prior theft conviction and an outstanding warrant, something prosecutors reportedly didn't know at the time. That detail could have been used to question her credibility. Again, the court ruled it wouldn't have altered the verdict. But to some, it hinted at missed details in a case that seemed too clean, too fast. There's also the broader concern that the emotional weight of Selena's death may have overshadowed critical questions during trial. Was the case rushed? Were all angles explored? Or did the system, under pressure to deliver swift justice, close the book before it was fully written? On paper, the trial was a victory for the prosecution. Yolanda was convicted. The public saw resolution. But if you look closely, there's a sense that some pieces never quite fit. And now, with new information surfacing in 2025, some are wondering if the case was ever truly solved. The question isn't whether Yolanda pulled the trigger. That's settled. The question is whether that trigger was part of a larger, more disturbing pattern that no one wanted to admit, or was one that some always suspected but didn't pursue. Either way, the trial may have ended, but the mystery didn't. Investigation update. Investigation update. After nearly 3 decades of silence, 2025 brought something no one saw coming. A quiet but undeniable shift in how investigators and even former prosecutors are now viewing Selena Quintanilla's murder. For years, the case was treated as closed. A fan-turned betrayer pulled the trigger, was convicted, and put behind bars. End of story. But now, new details have emerged during Yolanda Saldívar's parole review that suggest the case might not have been as simple or as spontaneous as once believed. It seems like the Selena Quintanilla mystery was finally solved in 2025. So, let's talk about the investigation update. According to reports, several sealed records were unsealed earlier this year, and what they contain has reignited public debate. One statement buried deep in the parole board's internal notes sent a ripple through the community. "We suspected her all along." The phrase wasn't from the family or the fans. It was reportedly used by someone involved in the early investigation, referring to growing concerns before Selena's death that Yolanda Saldívar's behavior had become erratic, manipulative, and dangerous. But if suspicions existed, why weren't they acted on sooner? According to sources close to the parole process, 2025's investigation brought out testimony that had never reached the public. Former boutique employees were quietly re-entered. Some claimed Yolanda had isolated Selena, filtered communication, and even created tension between Selena and her own staff. One described an incident where Yolanda locked herself in an office and refused to return money unless Selena came alone. It's unclear whether this specific situation happened close to March 31st, but it points to a disturbing pattern. Investigators also reviewed the 2019 allegation that Yolanda's defense never received all evidence. The now infamous white shoes and black baseball cap, items collected from the motel, were not listed in the original trial exhibits. Yolanda's lawyers argued that their absence robbed her of a full defense, claiming the items would have supported her claims. But now, in 2025, there's a different theory floating around. According to forensic analysts who reviewed the recovered crime scene items this year, there's reason to believe Selena may have been trying to retrieve more than paperwork that day. Some believe she was retrieving something Yolanda was holding as leverage, possibly not just financial records, but something more personal. That part remains speculative, but it introduces an entirely new layer to the story. If Selena knew she was walking into a volatile situation, why did she go alone? That question keeps resurfacing. And the answer, according to those familiar with this year's review, may lie in Selena's belief that Yolanda wouldn't harm her. The parole board's report states that Selena was under the impression that resolving the issue in person would be safer and more discreet. That impression sadly cost her everything. As for Yolanda, her parole request was denied. The board cited her continued refusal to take full accountability, her lack of remorse, and most notably the disturbing psychological profile that emerged during her incarceration. She is eligible for review again in 2030, but based on current statements, she is unlikely to be released anytime soon. And yet, it's the phrase, "we suspected her all along," that has people talking. Because if that suspicion existed inside the system, then why wasn't more done? Why wasn't Selena warned with more force? Why wasn't Yolanda flagged earlier before she could isolate and manipulate her way to the center of Selena's life? The new investigation doesn't answer everything, but it does suggest that what happened in room 158 wasn't an isolated act of panic. It may have been the final move in a long, slow spiral of obsession and control, one that left the world mourning a star while the real motive stayed in the shadows. Now, nearly 30 years later, that shadow is finally being pulled into the light. The aftermath, family, fans, and the aftermath Netflix revelation. When the parole board officially denied Yolanda Saldívar's release in March 2025, fans worldwide let out a collective sigh of relief. For Selena's family, the news brought a measure of peace, but not closure. Because with that decision came a wave of new attention, unexpected revelations, and a renewed national conversation that no one was quite prepared for. At the center of this storm was a documentary that had been years in the making. Selena y los Dinos, directed by Isabel Castro, made its debut at the Sundance Film Festival earlier this year. It wasn't a retelling of the tragedy. It was a re-examination of the life behind the legend built from never-before-seen home videos, family interviews, and private moments that painted a more intimate portrait of Selena. But what set this film apart wasn't just the footage. It was the timing. It dropped right as the parole hearings resurfaced long-buried doubts and lingering suspicions. Suddenly, Selena y los Dinos became more than a tribute. It became a piece of the investigation itself. Netflix quickly acquired the rights to stream it, setting a winter 2025 release date. What viewers saw went far beyond music. The documentary included candid interviews with Selena's sister Suzette and brother AB. They spoke not just about her career, but about the internal tension they felt in those final months. Suzette revealed that Selena had been carrying a lot more stress than people knew, and that the family had grown concerned about Yolanda's role, but struggled with how to handle it without damaging Selena's image or momentum. The film didn't accuse anyone. It didn't need to. What made it powerful was how naturally the pieces fell into place. Selena's soft-spoken optimism, Yolanda's increasingly erratic behavior, and the growing isolation surrounding their relationship. Suzette admitted she still wonders if they should have pushed harder to get Yolanda out of the picture sooner. "We all felt something was off," she said. But Selena was someone who always wanted to give people another chance. The documentary also touched on a heartbreaking detail that added another layer to the tragedy. Selena had begun talking seriously about starting a family. According to her husband, Chris Perez, she had wanted to step away from touring temporarily and focus on having children. That dream, quietly discussed in private, was never announced publicly. But in Selena Doss, it came to light and it devastated fans all over again. Social media lit up with emotional reactions. She had plans beyond music. One user wrote, "She wasn't just a superstar. She was building a whole life." The timing of this revelation aligned with the parole board's finding that Yolanda showed no remorse, only deepened the impact. For many fans, this wasn't just about justice. It was about grieving the life that never got to fully unfold. Meanwhile, public interest in the details of the murder spiked. Podcasts, YouTube documentaries, and even new Spanish-language talk shows began dissecting the recent parole hearing documents. They combed through phrases like, "We suspected her all along," and tried to make sense of why that suspicion wasn't acted on more aggressively. Was it denial? Was it lack of evidence? Or was it fear of damaging Selena's brand at the peak of her rise? Whatever the reason, the revelations from 2025 have shifted the public narrative. This isn't a story people want to forget. It's one they are now determined to understand. And in that pursuit, Selena's legacy continues to evolve, not just as a singer, but as a symbol of lost potential, misjudged trust, and a cultural icon whose final chapter may finally be coming into focus. Through all the pain, the fans remain fiercely loyal. They light candles, paint murals, and sing her songs. Because even with all the new details, one thing hasn't changed. Selena was loved, and that love has outlasted the silence. The legacy that refuses to die. Nearly 30 years have passed since Selena Quintanilla's voice was silenced, but somehow she feels more alive than ever. Her songs still echo through neighborhoods, clubs, and kitchen radios. Young fans, many born long after her death, still memorize every lyric and wear her image on their t-shirts. In 2025, with a wave of new revelations and emotional retellings, her legacy has transformed again. From pop culture icon to something far more enduring, a reminder of how unfinished stories never really go away. The recent parole board findings, the unsealed notes, and the resurfaced evidence didn't just stir curiosity. They cracked open an old wound. The phrase, "We suspected her all along," hit differently this time. It wasn't just about guilt or blame. It was about acknowledgement, a quiet confirmation that many people, even within Selena's orbit, had seen warning signs. They just didn't know how to act on them. Or maybe they thought there was still time. But that time ran out. In the months following the parole denial and Netflix's documentary announcement, a new generation of fans began diving deep into the case, re-examining every detail with fresh eyes. TikTok threads, YouTube breakdowns, and podcast episodes explored the psychology of Yolanda's obsession, the overlooked evidence, and the cultural pressure surrounding Selena's stardom. For many, it felt like the first time the full weight of a story had been told, unfiltered and painfully real. Selena's family has remained respectful but firm. They've expressed that while no new trial is on the table, they welcome honest conversations that honor her truth. Suzette Quintanilla said in a recent interview, "We never ask for perfection. We ask for peace, but peace doesn't always come quietly." That sentiment now resonates more than ever. The truth is, some mysteries never get tied up with a neat little bow. What happened between Selena and Yolanda in that motel room will always leave space for questions. Was it a moment of panic or something more calculated? Did Selena suspect the danger? Or did she truly believe Yolanda could be redeemed? The new information suggests it wasn't as spontaneous as once believed, but it still doesn't erase the heartbreak. Nothing could. What remains is a legacy that refuses to fade. Selena was more than a singer. She was a movement, a bridge between cultures, a symbol of hope, and a face of what could have been. And now in 2025, her story is finally being treated with the complexity it deserves. Not as a closed case, but as a living memory that still demands reflection. What do you think really happened that day? Let us know in the comments.